So I don't have a PowerPoint or a lot of statistics. I was actually kind of a last minute replacement, so I can just tell you a little bit about my experience as an employer here in Lake County, and specifically Moscow. So my name is Skandalos. Like Nancy mentioned, I own 2 restaurants here in town, and we employ about 100 people between our 2 restaurants and now bar that we just purchased back in August. And one of the reasons that we actually, how many of you have been to Sangria Myelina here by a show of hands? Okay, almost everybody. Okay, so this is easy. So how many of you are familiar with our tip policy at our restaurants? All of you. So I'm just gonna tell you how that came about. And I don't have, the statistics are not fresh in my mind, but part of the reason that Carly and I decided to go in the direction of having a service charge was that we noticed that there was a lot of swings in our employees' wages. So when you're a tip employee here in Idaho, you can pay a tip employee $3.35 an hour, and as long as with tips they make at least $7.25 an hour, then you're allowed to pay those kinds of wages. And what inevitably ended up happening in restaurants is that a situation of haves and have-nots were created. What do I mean by that? Well, if you work a Monday lunch as a server, that makes $3.35 an hour, versus a Friday night during football weekend, you're not making the same amount. It's very, very different. And one of the things that we noticed and we started to realize was that very often newer people were coming in and they were getting the slower shifts, the quieter shifts, so we could train them up, but the wage disparity was quite significant. Also, during summers, Moscow tends to be slower. During winters, Moscow tends to be slower. And so we're seeing really, really wide swing in wages. And so we started studying this just to kind of see what the difference was. And then we started looking into the tip culture and the tip environment. And I don't know if you're familiar with this or if you ever read about it, but unfortunately the restaurant industry is rife with sexual harassment. It's not just rife with sexual harassment from the employers, right? I mean, that's not, it also happens with customers. And that's because you create this weird power dynamic a lot of times with people that need to make a living. You know, so if somebody's being rude, somebody's being ornery, somebody's being inappropriate, a lot of times, I know this myself, having been a server and a bartender, you love it. And I'm not saying this occurs to everybody and every server has had this experience, but a lot of people have in our industry. And so when we started looking at those things, we wanted to try to mitigate that. We wanted to try to mitigate the swings in wages that our employees were experiencing. We wanted to be able to provide things such as paid time off. We wanted to be able to provide such things as paid sick time, which are things that we currently do. And actually maternity leave as well. I mean, we had one gal that got pregnant and she had to leave and she didn't have a job for 3 months until she was able to come back. And so those were things that we wanted to combat. And the more we looked at it, and also taking into account that about half the people that work in our restaurants are college students, and how expensive college is getting, and how expensive Moscow is to live in here, how expensive it is to live here, we decided to go into that direction. So putting a service charge out of restaurants allowed us to basically raise the low so that everybody was making much higher wages. It did unfortunately take down the highest of the high, but that was inconsistent to say the least. And so it was something that we were willing to look at. I don't know if you've been to our restaurants, hopefully service is still good. But you know, the one thing that came up over and over again with customers initially, because we're so used to this tipping culture in our country, is, you know, what do I do if my service is poor? Well, and what we always tell everybody is, like, if your service is poor, the best way to affect change is to make sure that you tell us, because we will ensure to make something about it and actually take it out of your server's wage, you know, or take it out of your bartender's wage, etc. So that was, you know, in a nutshell, why we went in that direction. We had a lot of people whose wages were inconsistent. You know, we've had college students that actually have talked to us in the past that have come and told us, you know, about our employee discounts, or we have a meal policy where we let everybody eat, you know, like rice and beans and soup is always free at the restaurant. So you'd be surprised how much rice and beans and soup you go through at our restaurants now, right, for college students. And actually, when you put up that slide of the top, when somebody put up that slide of the top ramen, I'm like, man, I remember those days, you know, going and getting top ramen and counting your pennies to see if you could make it through the semester. So, yeah, that's really been our experience. We did it because we're concerned about a large proportion of the people that work in our restaurants. I do urge you all to go out and vote, and actually vote for the people that are trying to make a difference. I got into an argument actually with a legislator recently, and I'm gonna bring this up because this is important, and this is something that everybody needs to think about critically in our town. We live on an island, whether you like to believe that or not, right? We live on an island because you can't just go and get a job down the street. We don't live in a large metro area. So this nonsense of, well, you know, if you raise the minimum wage, people are gonna leave. In our town, unfortunately, I could pay $2, $3 less an hour, and I would still have more employees than I would know what to do with. Because it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You have 11,000 kids that are showing up to go to the U of I. You have 22,000 kids that go to WSU that are also looking for jobs, and there's not enough jobs to go around. And it puts downward pressure on wages. You know, and I think that, I mean, for me personally, I think it's morally wrong to not pay people enough for them to be able to live on. But also from the business perspective, and something that people have to consider as well, is that I can't also keep raising prices when nobody else around me does. Because if I were to do that, eventually I would have no customers, so then everybody's out of a job. So the only way to try to correct those situations is to try to legislate at some point in our country and say, nobody should be okay with somebody working in our country full-time and living in poverty. And that's allowed to happen. You know, that's something to consider. And as an employer, I can tell you that it has not been adverse for us to raise wages. We've had high retention, it's been better for our business. Have people left? Yeah, some people that can go and be a lone wolf and make a lot better money serving Friday and Saturday nights at restaurants. But overall, we have a very steady workforce. It's been really, really beneficial for us. And everybody that has worked at our restaurants has benefited from this stability in the wages that they've seen.